I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington, and this week on Face the Nation, President Trump vows to reshape global trade, and that sends stock markets reeling. Is it just short-term pain or a long-term problem? President Trump delivered on his campaign promises, putting 25% duties on foreign autos and 10% on imports from all countries. But his decision to launch a surprise round of wide-ranging tariffs on allies and adversaries alike shocked investors and sparked recession fears.
The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom.
The president claims all is going according to plan and hit the links this weekend, though he was tracking headlines about China's decision to fire back with tariffs on all American products. We'll get the latest from President Trump's point man on tariffs, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and check in with the number 2 Senate Republican John Barrasso. He's tasked with carrying out the other part of the president's economic agenda, sweeping tax cuts. House Republican Don Bacon and Democratic Senator Maria Cantwell will also join us. They want Congress to reclaim its authority over trade policy. Then, as the administration continues talks with Russia for a possible peace deal in Ukraine, we'll ask NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte what the budding relationship could mean for the future of the Western alliance. It's all just ahead on Face the Nation. Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. It is shaping up to be another turbulent week as President Trump's trade war with the world escalates. The global sell-off triggered by President Trump's tariff announcements wiped out more than $6 trillion of wealth from the U.S. stock market in just 2 days. In a social media post yesterday, the president urged the country to hang tough. All this as tens of thousands of people took to the streets yesterday from Washington, D.C. to Minnesota and Columbus, Ohio, protesting many of Trump's policies, Elon Musk, and tariffs. We begin this morning with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Mr. Secretary, welcome to Face the Nation.
Great to be here.
We see about 60% of Americans have money in the stock market, which means that retirees could be just as concerned as hedge fund managers this morning. Did you expect this level of shock in the financial markets?
Well, you've got to realize this is a national security issue. I mean, we don't make medicine in this country anymore. We don't make ships. We don't have enough steel and aluminum to fight a battle. Right? All our semiconductors are made overseas, so every button we press when we try to start our car or even use our microwave, these are all semiconductors. They're all made elsewhere. We've got to start to protect ourselves, and we've got to stop having all the countries of the world ripping us off. We have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit, and the rest of the world has a surplus with us. They're earning our money. They're taking our money.
Right.
And Donald Trump has seen this, and he's going to stop it. So it is going to be a big change. Of course it's going to be a big change, but the rest of the world has been ripping us off for all these many years. Donald Trump has seen it. He's spoken about it.
I understand
and he's just
that.
not going to take it anymore, and that's his model.
And that was abundantly clear during the presidential campaign how much the president truly believes in tariffs and putting him at the center of his economic policy. But you saw absolute panic in the global markets. Did you expect that, or were you surprised?
No, I think the point is you need to reset the power of the United States of America and reset it against all our allies and our enemies alike. The idea that all the countries of the world can run trade surpluses with America and buy our things with us. Remember, $1.2 trillion. In 1980, we were a net investor, meaning we owned more of the rest of the world than they owned of us.
Yeah, it's a different world. It's a different market.
And now they own $18 trillion of us net. So that means the rest of the world, every year when we run a $1.2 trillion deficit, The rest of the world buys $1.2 trillion of America, and it goes up and up and up. And eventually, we're not going to own America, and we are going to be owned by the rest of the world. Imagine if we had a war and we can't build a ship, we can't fly a plane, we can't build our own planes, we don't have our own semiconductors. This is what the president is here to fix for America. It's in his hands, and he wants to fix America. This is his chance to fix America, and we need him to fix it for our children and our grandchildren.
Okay, but for businesses to do what you're doing, because what I hear you laying out there is a plan to reindustrialize the United States and to bring companies back to America. For a CEO to choose to invest.
Well said.
But for a CEO to make those decisions, you know this, they need certainty. They need to know if it costs them more to stay overseas or if it costs them more to move here. So can you give them clarity so that they don't just cut jobs because they're dealing with the cost of these tariffs? Can you tell them how long they're staying in place?
Absolutely. The United States of America is going to protect the people who invest in America. Trillions and trillions of dollars, you heard the president speak about it, are coming to invest in America. This is the economy of the world. We are the consumer of the world, and companies need to build it here, and we will protect them for building it here.
Okay,
we will help the American workers. Yes, American workers are more expensive, but they're better. We're going to protect all the factories that come to America, and that's what's coming here. So the president
is the 10% tariff
he's going to
permanent?
Protect them. Well, remember, this is a national security issue.
I got it. Is the 10% tariff
our budget
permanent?
deficit? That, you know, the laws of America, he would like it to be that we need to protect the companies that invest here, and we are going to protect the companies that invest here. That is the policy of the United States of America. That's why trillions of dollars are coming here. The ripoff of the United States of America is over. All these companies are going to come and invest here. That's what they're doing. That's why they've committed trillions of dollars. They know this is the economy.
Mr. Secretary,
this is the place to go.
Mr. Secretary, the campaign's over. You won. So I'm asking what the plan is. So the Treasury Secretary said on another network, we're going to hold the course. It's not the kind of thing you can negotiate away in days or weeks. That makes it sound like the tariffs are staying in place at least for days or weeks. Is that correct, or is the president considering postponing implementation to negotiate?
There is no postponing. They are definitely going to stay in place for days and weeks. That is sort of obvious. The president needs to reset global trade. Everybody has a trade surplus, and we have a trade deficit. We are paying away our future and our lives. The countries of the world are ripping us off, and it's got to end. The president has made it crystal clear. This is the policy we are going to protect. The factories that come build in America, we are going to protect them. They're going to be successful. That's why they're going to build in America, the greatest economy in the earth. All of these companies are going to come and build here.
So when three of the president's other economic advisors who are on other networks today say that 50 different countries have been calling the White House to try to talk about the tariffs, what does that mean? Because that makes it sound like there is a negotiation, which is different from saying the tariffs are permanent.
Well, what it shows is that all these countries know that they've been ripping us off, and the day has come for that to end. Now, the problem is, it's not just tariffs. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, Vietnam said they'd like to be 0-0. Remember, Vietnam sends us $120 billion worth of goods every year.
Yes,
and
cheap
we send them about $12 billion. Wait, we send them $12 billion. So it's not the tariffs. It has nothing to do with tariffs. If they went to 0-0, they would go to $200 billion with us. We need to stop the ripoff, and 0-0 is the way
I
to
know,
make
but we
a
don't have
more
0-0,
of a
sir.
ripoff.
We don't have 0-0, actually, because when we saw the president stand in the Rose Garden holding up that chart that you helped make, that wasn't actually tariffs. That was actually confusing to investors because it was some kind of other formula, and the countries themselves seemed kind of random. Like, why are the Heard and McDonald Islands, which don't export to the United States and are quite literally inhabited by penguins, why do they face a 10% tariffs? Did you use AI to generate this? No. The idea is why
that there
are they
no
on the
countries
list
left off. Because the idea, what happens is, if you leave anything off the list, the countries that try to basically arbitrage America go through those countries to us. Any country, like we had tariffs, the president put tariffs on China, right, in 2018. And then what China started doing is they started going through other countries to America.
Right.
They just built through other countries through America. And so the president knows that. He's tired of it. And he's going to fix that. So basically, he said, look, I can't let any part of the world be a place where China or other countries can ship through them. So he ended those loopholes, these ridiculous loopholes. And now what he's trying to say is, I'm going to fix the trade deficit of the United States of America. It's a national security issue. We need to make medicine. We need to make semiconductors. We need to make ships. We need to have steel and aluminum. Come on. We need the greatness of America to actually be built in America. And he's tired of getting ripped off by the rest of the world.
Okay, but just to be clear, April 9th, the so-called retaliatory tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, I should say, are those coming? Or are they open to negotiation?
The tariffs are coming. He announced it, and he wasn't kidding. The tariffs are coming. Of course they are.
Okay. Is the administration considering any kind of offset, any kind of subsidy? You mentioned the first administration, there was some bailout to farmers to help them deal with the pain from Chinese retaliation. Are you looking at that now?
Not that I have not participated in any meetings with respect to that. The country is focused on, you realize trillions of dollars of factories are going to be built in America. That's huge GDP. The factories being built in America are huge. That
takes
GDP.
Years. And you've said that robots are going to fill those jobs. So those aren't union
it's really automated
jobs.
It's automated factories, but the key is, who's going to build the factories? Who's going to operate the factories? Who's going to make them work? Great American workers. You know, we are going to replace
on other
the
networks.
armies of millions of people. Well, remember, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones. That kind of thing is going to come to America. It's going to be automated, and great Americans, the trade craft of America, is going to fix them, is going to work on them. They're going to be mechanics. There's going to be HVAC specialists. There's going to be electricians. The trade craft of America, our high school educated Americans, the core to our workforce is going to have the greatest resurgence of jobs in the history of America to work on these high-tech factories, which are all coming to America. That's what's going to build our next generation of America.
Are you concerned in the time it will take for a company to move to America that it will benefit China in the immediate term, that other markets will look to other suppliers instead of dealing with the United States?
That is ridiculous. The problem is everyone in the world sells to us. Our economy is the consumer of the world. We are the only one with a trade deficit. The rest of the world has a trade surplus. Why does Europe have a trade surplus? Is there something about Europe that's special? Seriously, are they a different world than we are? Why are they selling $200 billion a year,
Mr. Secretary,
more to us? It's because it's not fair. The rules are made not fair, and President Trump is going to fix them, and he's doing it for America, and he's doing it for your children and mine and our grandchildren. This is the moment that the United States of America takes hold of itself, and Donald Trump's been talking about this his whole life. This is Donald Trump's agenda, and we are all here to help him execute it.
And we will take him at his word quite literally. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your time this morning. Face the Nation will be back in a minute. Stay with us. We're joined now by one of the top Republicans in the Senate, Wyoming's John Barrasso, the whip. Good to have you here in person, Senator.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
So I want to ask you about what the Secretary just laid out. He did not describe this as leverage to get to a deal. Said this, take him literally, the tariffs are here to stay. We've already seen some conservative groups like the New Civil Liberties Alliance file suit saying that these are not on solid constitutional and legal ground. Do you think the president's on solid legal ground?
Well, I think he is. But this is about a monumental change in the direction of our government. And I'm talking about change in terms of the the size as well as the priorities. And this is a 180-degree change from what we had for the last 4 years with big government, big spending, big taxes. And we have a comprehensive economic plan to get to a strong, healthy, growing economy for the American people. That's why we passed what we did just yesterday in the Senate, because we want people to have better jobs, more opportunities, and more money in their own pockets.
Right.
So in terms of the tariffs, I believe they're a tool, and I think we have to go after China. They have been abusing us for years, and I believe the president is on firm constitutional grounds.
But when I hear you talk about sort of the 1-2 punch on the economic plan for the president, tax cuts being one of them, isn't there some coordination on sequencing here? Because wouldn't you go ahead and remove the regulations and go ahead with the tax cuts before you go to war with the entire world over trade?
Well, the president has been talking about these tariffs. Every speech that I was with him during the campaign, there is no surprise here. He's also talked about making sure we don't have this $4 trillion tax increase that the Democrats want to have. We have a lot of work to do to reverse the damage that's been done over the last 4 years with the Democrats that led to the highest inflation in 40 years. So the president wants to get a lot of things done, and I want to get a lot of things done in Congress as part of this comprehensive economic plan.
I'm sure you saw the Fed chair also say that we may be facing inflation now in part because of these tariffs. You know, some in the Senate are very concerned about having more control and say over trade. Maria Cantwell, a senator who will be with us later in this program, partnered with Chuck Grassley, one of the most powerful Republicans, with this bill to try to claw back control. They want 48 hours notice on tariffs, suggest they didn't get much this time, and they want them to expire after 60 days unless Congress approves of them. Will leadership let this effort advance?
Well, Senator Grassley's chairman of the Judiciary Committee, but let me just say the president is on firm legal grounds here. Over the last 90 years, Congress has given the different presidents, more and more authority to deal with national security issues with regard to tariffs, to use tariffs with regard to unfair trade. So the president has the authority. I think this is similar to the bill that Chuck Grassley introduced about 5 years ago. They had debate then. Many of the co-sponsors are the same. This will get a thorough hearing, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Do you think, though, that Congress needs to have more of a say on trade issues?
Well, the Constitution says Congress has the entire say, but over the last 90 years,
That's not the way it's playing
more
out
and more
now.
authority have been given to the president to be able to be more nimble, to react in terms of national security, in terms of unfair trade, and I think President Trump is doing what he has every right to do.
But it sounds like you're open to making that more clear on what the limits should be?
Well, there'll be a discussion in the Senate. We'll see which way the discussion goes.
You mentioned the work that got done over the weekend. You did take this step forward in advancing the president's tax agenda and raising the debt ceiling with this budget framework. You know what a fight you're going to have with fellow Republicans over in the House. Jody Arrington, the budget chairman, called it unserious and disappointing, accused your Republican colleagues of creating $6 trillion in new costs and a mere $4 billion in enforceable cuts. Is this headed for failure in the House?
No. We are united in what we believe in terms of making sure we have a nation that is safe and prosperous. The Speaker of the House and the leadership of the House came out and endorsed what we have done and said, hey, we ought to move ahead and take that next step.
5 Republicans have come out against it.
So what we have seen,
narrow margin.
But they all agree with what we want to do, which is unleash American energy to get energy prices down for people. They all agree that we ought to make sure that we don't have these $4 trillion tax increases. They all want to make sure we secure the border. So all of the parts of what we have here are part of what we want to have done. Now, I'm the whip. My job is to count votes. We need 51 in the Senate. They need 218 in the House. We have to iron out the differences. We're committed to getting it done.
Well, we know they're short about 5 votes right now. So it sounds like if you have to take another bite at the apple, the reason that this matters so much is procedurally you've got to clear the way for all those big things you want to get done, like the tax cuts by September. Speaker Johnson said he wants it done by May. Senator Langford said it has to get done by August. Does all the instability speed things up for you?
Well, I'm not worried about deadlines. I want to get I have an urgency to get it done as soon as we can so we can get these policies in place, and also to provide the certainty to people who are worried. Are my taxes going to go up at the end of the year? They want to have the confidence that they're not going to go up. I think the more certainty we can provide to the folks around the country, that they will see that we have on the right path for a strong, healthy, growing economy. And we want to get the country back on track. And the sooner we can get this passed, the sooner we can reverse the damage that the Democrats have done over the last 4 years.
You got to get Speaker Johnson to wrangle those votes, though, which you admit they're not there right now.
Well, we're going to put the language together. We do have to iron out the differences, and I'm committed to getting it done.
So in about 18 months, Congress will face elections, these midterm races. Here's your fellow Republican, Senator Rand Paul.
Historically, tariffs have also led to political decimation. When McKinley most famously put tariffs on in 1890, they lost 50% of their seats in the next election. When Hot Smoothie put on their tariff in the early 1930s, we lost the House and the Senate for 60 years.
Are you afraid history is going to repeat itself in 2026?
Well, no, I'm not. There's a long way between now and the 2026 elections. President Trump won based on two things: that the Democrats were the party of high prices and an open border. No one doubted President Trump's ability to get the border closed. I mean, 137,000 illegal immigrants in March of last year, Biden. This past March, down to 7,000. So he has been able to do that. The Republicans are going to be judged on the economy, which is why I'm not concerned about—
And the Fed chairman saying inflation is going to potentially go up, and there's great uncertainty.
That's why I want to get this comprehensive economic plan in place as soon as possible. The certainty that the tax increases are not going to be there, the certainty that we have American energy and those jobs, the certainty we're bringing jobs back into the country. All of those things are going to make sure that by the election 18 months from now, that people say, yeah, we're on the right path. The Republicans have gotten the country back. The country is back on track. I mean, right now, from I think it's even your own CBS poll, in terms of right track, wrong track, right direction, wrong direction, we're at the highest we've been in 20 years in terms of the direction the country is heading.
That was pre-tariffs. Senator Ted Cruz said this.
Tariffs are a tax on consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived and they serve as leverage to lower tariffs across the globe.
There's a lot of concern, including from your old friend Mitch McConnell. When do you get concerned that this is going to hurt the economic story you're trying to tell?
Well, you won't be surprised. Ted and I were on the floor just 2 in the morning. I said, you know, I bet Margaret's going to show that tape of what you just said about tariffs. And we joked about it a little bit, but there is concern. There's concern across the country. People are watching the markets. This is not a surprise. People are concerned about this. 401ks, retirement plans, they do the best when we have confidence in the future, when we have a strong, healthy, growing economy. And that's why we have a comprehensive economic plan to deal with all of this, to making sure that taxes don't go up, to cut so much of this reckless Washington spending. People saw the list of all of the terrible things we've been spending money on the last 4 years, and people were offended and angry at that. What we're doing is also cutting a lot of this reckless Washington spending, get people more money in their own pockets.
Markets move a lot faster than Congress does, Senator. So you've got your work cut out for you, but we appreciate you laying out the details for us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with a lot more Face the Nation. Stay with us. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We turn now to the top Democrat on the Commerce Committee, Washington State Senator Maria Cantwell. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Senator, you heard the Senate whip talk about your effort to claw back some control over trade. He said it will have a thorough hearing and we'll see where it goes from there. Do you have any indication of momentum among some of your Republican colleagues?
Well, the first day of introduction, we signed up 7 Republicans. So usually you don't get a first introduction and get so many people on board. But I think it shows the anxiety that people have. I'm sure if they listen to their constituents, consumer challenges are already starting to surface, and certainly the stock market's impact on retirement income is shaking a lot of people. So I'm sure my colleagues will hear from them. Today, consumer groups are announcing, and retailers, the fact that they want Congress to take this action up. And so I think we're hearing from a big segment of the economy. The consumer spending is a big part of GDP, and they're worried.
So you've got, what, 6 Republicans at this point?
7.
7. And now you're saying retailers, like you have CEOs who are on board, or industry groups?
Industry groups like the Retailers Association, the outdoor industry, the consumer electronics groups, Main Street Alliance, organizations who know their bread and butter comes from consumer spending, which is a big part of our economy. And so they are very anxious about a plan. Listen, I listened to your segment. I've never heard so much about fuzzy math in my life. And the notion that that chart is getting so much national attention, you know, the letters in Greek alphabet, all this stuff that makes no sense. That's what consumers are saying. How is this helping me in a time of inflation? You're adding to my cost with a tax on my consumer goods. And so I think that's why we're gaining support from these organizations today.
So Canada and China are among your state's largest export markets. Both have already announced retaliatory tariffs. I know you've said previously that the first Trump administration and the more limited tariffs still to this day have an impact on your state. So how much wiggle room do we have with time here? Because you heard the Commerce Secretary say that basically these aren't a negotiating ploy, that they are staying in place. That's what he says.
Well,
so how long before damage?
Well, we have seen damage from the first Trump tariffs on things like apples, and markets closed. And what you do is you end up then losing farm family economies. You don't necessarily lose farmland. Some big corporation might buy it, but you lose family farms. So our objective should be to help farmers open up doors to these overseas markets. The United States' goal here should be to make great manufactured products and grow great agricultural products, and then get those markets opened up. But what the president is doing is, instead of building those alliances, he basically is getting into a trade war that is having unbelievable impact. When his last tariffs on India, we reopened with the Apple market, and we went to India and said, let's get rid of this, and we were successful. And that's the kind of action we want to see today.
So your state is one of the top 5 unionized states in the country. You have the world's largest plane manufacturer, Boeing, in Washington. So I wonder if those union workers are as supportive of the tariffs as the auto industry workers have been. They are not against them, even though some are Democrats. In fact, they think some of them, including on this program, like Sean Fain, have been very supportive.
Well, we're seeing, you could get the letter from the Machinists International. They don't support the president on this. And that is because they understand how much the United States and Canada have become an integrated supply chain. That helped us lower the cost of U.S. manufacturing for cars and for airplanes. And lowering that cost means that we're even more competitive. So they don't like the uncertainty. And what they would like to see instead is the continuation of investment from the last administration. So when you think of chips and science, and you think of the Inflation Reduction Act that made investments in next generation technology, the sectors that have a lot of employees want to win on innovation. They know that investment in innovation will help us outpace our competition, not a tariff that makes the product more expensive.
So Boeing CEO testified 80% of the airplanes they deliver are to markets outside the U.S. 80% of the content of those airplanes are manufactured here. They have a vested interest in clearing the decks for themselves here. What are they telling you about their conversations with the administration?
Well, everybody's concerned that the administration might retaliate against them, that if they're not front and center in this debate, but they're clear that they are being heard. I think people are saying that their strategy is, if there's a demand for 40,000 airplanes and we could increase 1,000 more planes being sold, it would have a huge impact on the trade deficit. So they're trying to say, Mr. President, don't cut the innovation and investment. Don't make semiconductors more expensive. Don't make the parts more expensive. Make it cheaper. And the United States bet on the American worker, and they will do the rest when it comes to the innovation that's required for America to build the best products. So I think the president's math is wrong. I think he doesn't know the calculus is going to be so devastating to American consumers, and that's why those groups are joining us today.
Senator Cantwell, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. We go now to Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon, who joins us this morning from Omaha. Congressman, I have a lot to get to with you on a number of topics here, but just to pick up on the tariffs that we've been speaking about, I know you are introducing companion legislation to what Senator Cantwell just laid out for us. But as I understand it, in the House, Republican leaders have already restricted the ability to rein in changes to the Mexico, Canada, and China tariffs. They tucked language into the continuing resolution. Does that get in your way when you are trying to now claw back some congressional control of tariffs?
Well, first of all, good morning, Margaret. Thanks for having me on. And I enjoyed listening to Senator Cantwell. I support the legislation that Senator Grassley, Senator Cantwell, we have a total of 7 Republicans in the Senate. And I have some beginning support on the House side, which we'll unveil tomorrow. It will be harder to pass this in the House, no doubt. I think if we get 60 votes in the Senate, they'll put pressure on the House to look at this. And if we continue to see the stock market go a certain direction, or if we see inflation or unemployment shift in a bad way, I think then this bill becomes a very viable bill. So it will not pass tomorrow or maybe in the next couple of weeks, but this will be in the queue that we can use. And it's time that Congress restores its authorities here. In the Constitution, it's clear. The House and the Senate, Congress has the power of tariffs and taxes, and we gave some of that power to the executive branch. And I think in hindsight, that was a mistake.
But I hear you saying you have some momentum. Respectfully, sir, the president talked all the time during the campaign about tariffs. He put them at the centerpiece of his policy. He talked about the glory days of the 1800s and wanting to go back to him. Did Republicans just not take him seriously?
Well, there's a couple of facets to your question, Margaret. It's a good question. You're right, though. When you look back, it was Republican-supported tariffs in the 1800s and up through about 1930 when we passed the Smoot-Hartley Act that created one of the worst depression we ever had. We learned from that tariffs and protectionism does not work, and that free trade, in the end, as long as it's fair, we want fair trade. And I support the president wanting to get fairness. Some of these countries do treat us wrong, but fair trade should be the goal. And you're right, the president talked about this. He did not hide as this is part of his agenda. But here's my take on it, and I've been studying politics since I was like 13 years old. People voted for President Trump because of the border, and he has really delivered there. They voted for him, too, because inflation surpassed wage increases. They were poorer today than they were 4 years ago. And I really think people voted for President Trump because of that, the border, and maybe crime. They saw crime in the big cities. I don't think, in the end, tariffs was really a big factor in people's decision-making when it came to last November.
Yeah, I know we certainly covered them on this program. And it is surprising to me, or perhaps it shouldn't be, that the business community is so silent right now. As Senator Cantwell said, she said they're afraid. But there is a conservative group, the New Civil Liberties Alliance, that filed suit to challenge these tariffs in court. Do you think it is the courts where this ultimately gets settled?
I think ultimately it's in Congress once we see enough of this, but maybe the courts as well. The Constitution makes it very clear. Congress has control of taxes. And by the way, and let's be candid, tariffs are a tax. But they also mentions tariffs in the Constitution. And we gave the president emergency powers. So the courts will have to decide as what just happened. Is this emergency powers, or is this a total change in tariff policy? And I think it's really the latter. This is where Congress has to step in and say, do we really want to create this new policy on tariffs? And if it is, it should come from the Congress and not the president.
I want to ask you as well about your work on the Armed Services Committee. President Trump has fired the top 2 officials at the head of the very powerful National Security Agency. It's one of the most powerful intelligence agencies we have. It vacuums up information around the world through wiretapping, signals intercepts, and they work with the military, with Cyber Command. Have you received any explanation to Congress as to why General Hawk, the 4-star general unanimously confirmed to the job, was suddenly dismissed
Margaret, I have not, but let me just comment on this. General Hawk is the absolute best leader in the U.S. military to lead Cyber Command and National Security Agency. He commanded both because half of Cyber Command relies on NSA to be effective in cyber operations. So you have to have this team. He was in charge of both. He served 34 years in the military, and his entire career was working signals intelligence or cyber operations. Frankly, he is the best that we had. And they also fired the number 2 person at National Security Agency without an explanation. I will tell you, this puts us back. It hurts us. I will tell you, Russia and China today are laughing at us because we just fired the absolute best leaders, the most qualified guys that we spent 3.5 decades preparing to have this role, and he's gone. And it's heartbreaking to see that that decision was made without explanation, and it hurt us.
And our reporting as a network is that it came as a decision following an Oval Office meeting with a right-wing activist named Laura Loomer, who has spread conspiracy theories about 9/11, said anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant things, racist things. It also happened as at least 6 other National Security Council officials at the White House were dismissed on the advice of Laura Loomer. I'm wondering, again, respectfully, sir, Republicans are controlling, you have oversight. Are there going to be hearings on this? Are there other Republicans who are concerned and going to do something about it?
I'm sure there'll be some oversight. I'm the chairman of the cyber subcommittee, and so I will guarantee you that we will have various military leaders. We'll have the Secretary of Defense speak to us, and he will be asked about this.
Did he even know?
I don't know that he know, but we'll find out when we ask him. We'll ask, but they'll say that this is the president's right, and the president does have constitutional right to do this, but it doesn't make it appropriate. Or okay, he may have the constitutional authority to do it, but it doesn't make it right. And in the end, I'm going to make it clear: we just removed the most qualified military leader that we had to run Cyber Command and NSA, and we will ask about it. Now, we have oversight. That doesn't mean we can. The president does have the constitutional authority to do this, but we have an opportunity to probe into this and ask why. And I have a responsibility to make clear this is wrong. It hurt us. It hurt our country.
Very quickly, do you think it is so that the president can split up those 2 commands and put someone of his own choosing, a political ally, at the top of the NSA?
You know, it's possible. I know that's out there, but I would say that's a mistake. NSA is very important to Cyber Command. You cannot do Cyber Command without the inputs from the National Security Agency, the SIGINT. If you separate and put them under 2 different commands, then you're going to create a dysfunctional partnership, and it will hurt our cyber operations against China and Russia.
Okay. Congressman, we'd love to have you back for another conversation about cyber one time. We have to leave it there. We'll be back in a moment. On Friday, we spoke with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and began our conversation by asking about the potential impact of the Trump administration's sweeping global tariffs on the security alliance.
There are tensions between allies because of this tariff question, but this is not concerning the alliance as a whole, because there will be potentially impact on the economies, but not to an extent that it will impact our collective defense. That's my firm conviction.
The next summit is now going to be held in June, and leaders there are expected to hike the military budget spending goal from 2% to 3%. The Trump administration wants it all the way up to spending about 5% on a country's own defense. How do you convince members to spend more to counter the threat from Russia at a time when the U.S. is going closer to it and the U.S. is putting economic pressure on Europe?
What Trump has done since he came into office is break the deadlock when it comes to this terrible war in Ukraine, because we've got to stop the killing. We've got to stop the fighting, and I commend him for that. And then when it comes to defense spending, the last couple of months, here in the European side of NATO, it is staggering, the amounts of billions coming in. But we have to continue doing this, because, as I said in December, if we would stick to the old 2%, we cannot defend ourselves here in 3 to 5 years.
But at the same time that President Trump is calling for a peace deal in Ukraine, there is this parallel, separate effort to repair America's relationship with Russia. Doesn't the U.S. getting closer to Russia undercut your efforts to counter Russia?
Of course, I'm not in the room when all these talks take place, but what I'm seeing from a distance and hearing from my American colleagues, and including the president, whom I visited a couple of weeks ago in a very successful meeting we had in the Oval Office, and then during lunch, there is this effort to bring this war to an end. The ball clearly is in the court of the Russians. They are not moving fast enough, is my impression, including the impression I'm getting from my American interlocutors, that Russia really has to do more to bring this war to an end. The Ukrainians are reeling close to the American position. And we have to see how far the Americans can get this. But I am completely supporting that effort, because this war of protection, it was unsustainable in the long term. So many people dying, so much of the Ukrainian infrastructure being damaged, cities being destroyed. This got to end.
General Cavoli, who you know well as the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, the U.S. general is here in Washington testifying this week. He said Russia intends to diminish U.S. leadership and influence. What is happening to NATO members here? And is Russia succeeding in this destabilization campaign?
What we are seeing in Europe, but also in the US, but let me speak for the European side of NATO, is that the Russians, through cyber attacks, assassination attempts, jamming commercial airplanes in the Baltic area, cyber attacks on the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, cutting critical undersea infrastructure between Baltic countries and Finland, and in other parts of the Baltic Sea. They're conducting this campaign. The good news is that as NATO, as collective, we are much, much better, not only at assessing what is happening, but also making sure that we prevent the next steps in this campaign from happening.
So that destabilization campaign has not halted or paused as these attempts to broker peace have been underway?
Well, I mean, this whole destabilization campaign is going on for years now.
Yeah.
And I have no day-to-day assessment, but the reports we are getting is that the Russians are still very active. We are still worried about, for example, the critical undersea infrastructure. But thanks to Chris Cavoli and in his role as Supreme Allied Commander, we have in less than 10 days brought together a big endeavor by European NATO allies in the Baltic Sea to really make it very difficult for the Russians to continue doing this. And again, they hate us for this, and I love that.
There are roughly about 90,000 or more U.S. troops stationed in Europe right now. Secretary Hegseth said Europe should not assume that presence is going to last forever. I know you say that the U.S. is committed to NATO, but do you have any sense of how fast or significant this kind of drawdown that's being mentioned by Hegseth could be? And is there a NATO backup plan?
There are no concrete plans for the drawdown. What we know, and Pete Hegseth was very clear on this, is that this US administration, but by the way, this is US policy since 2010, to pivot more towards Asia, towards the Indo-Pacific. And the agreement we have is that we will do whatever is necessary in a no surprises way. I completely acknowledge the fact that the United States has more theaters to attend to, not only the Euro-Atlantic, but also the Indo-Pacific. And by the way, also thanks to President Trump and his position on this, as NATO, we will be more and more active in the Indo-Pacific with our partners. I will visit Japan next week to have my meetings there with the senior leadership to see how we can intensify that strong relationship we already have with the Indo-Pacific.
You've raised concern that China is building towards 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. Is that a direct threat to NATO?
It is a direct threat to the stability in the whole world, including NATO territory, absolutely. They have now more Navy ships sailing than the United States. We have a problem, the United States part of NATO, the Canadian part of NATO, European part of NATO, that we are not producing enough defense industrial products. We are producing in a full year in ammunition what Russia is producing in 3 months. That's totally crazy. And that's why the President and I discussed, and the other senior leaders in the US and I discussed also with European allies, that we have not only to ramp up spending, but also the defense industrial production. That includes cutting the red tape, both in the US and here in Europe.
All right, just to quickly clarify, that China's nuclear arsenal is a direct threat to NATO.
Well, it's there not to be used against China. But I would say more generally, let's not be naive about China. The build-up of their armed forces is taking place at a pace which is incredible. And when we talk about Ukraine and bringing Ukraine to a durable end and a peace, a durable peace in the end, let's not forget that Russia is working with North Korea and China and Iran. And that in the end there is an audience of one watching what comes out of this. And that is the first secretary of the Communist Party of China, Xi Jinping. And he will assess, when there is a deal on Ukraine, who comes out on top? Is it the West or is it Russia? And if it is Russia, he would get his thoughts going about his territorial claims in the Indo-Pacific. So there are big risks involved. And that's why we have to bring Ukraine to a peace which is lasting and that Putin will never try this again.
You can see our full interview on CBSNews.com and on our YouTube page. We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.